The safety is off. There's a round in the chamber. This is Armed Alabama. Sponsored by McCoy Outdoor Company, Mobile's hometown full-line outdoor sporting products and gear store. An interactive talk show discussing self-defense, product reviews, shooting tips, safety, and more. Your calls, comments, and texts welcome at 343-0106. Now, here are your hosts, retired judge and certified NRA instructor Rusty Johnston and certified NRA law enforcement instructor Adam Strange.
Where the city lights don't shine, I live my life the simple way, and you know I'm doing just fine. I fish, I hunt, and I shoot my guns, and I raise a little hell. The things I do, you know I do them well. This is my America, and I'm so proud. I say it loud. This is my America. God bless America, land of the free, because of the brave. This is my America.
And thank you, singer-songwriter Buck Allen. Visit him at Buck Allen, singer-songwriter Buck Allen, Buckallen. Welcome to the Armed Alabama Show for October 15, 2019. This is retired circuit judge and NRA certified instructor Rusty Johnston. I've given my partner Adam Strange the night off. If you've never heard of Armed Alabama, start listening to us every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Time on FM Talk 106.5. Also broadcast normally on Facebook Live, although not tonight. I put a note up there, so I guess you're not hearing me, but switch over to one of the other mediums. You can go to the www.fmtalk1065.com website and hear us if you're having trouble hearing on the radio. Remember, our Armed Alabama is Alabama's only firearms-based radio FM radio show in the state, and we've had a great year. We're coming up on our 4th anniversary. We talk pistols, revolvers, shotguns, concealed carry, ammunition, training, and attacks on our God-given rights to protect ourselves and our family. As I said, remember to visit our website. That's www.armedalabama.com. Also, visit our Facebook page at Armed Alabama Radio, FM Talk 106.5. And remember to visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're almost at 1,400 viewers. Subscribers. Just put in the search tab Armed Alabama and you will get there. A mandatory trigger warning is advised. We want everyone to listen. However, some Bolshevik, socialist, snowflakes, and university professor types may experience extreme high blood pressure during this program. Now, on this date in history, I hope some of y'all remember this, Clarence Thomas was confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court by the United States Senate, and I think it's 52-48. That is 4 days after a famous exchange that took place during Senator Biden's committee hearing.
And from my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you.
And Clarence Thomas was exactly right. Bork's nomination, Robert Bork's, was probably the first really nasty one. In retrospect, frankly, I'm glad he wasn't confirmed because he didn't have a proper view of the Ninth Amendment. But Clarence Thomas was right. And by the way, I looked at several, and they weren't polls of university professors. These were votes on key freedom issues. Over the past 25 years, Clarence Thomas has been the most consistent, conservative, member of the Supreme Court. Number second was Scalia, but Thomas came in first, and that's great to hear. Remember, you all, first come rights, then come government. We had all of our rights before the United States government was created, and one of the reasons I mentioned that is it's an organization meeting tonight that I love. I should have been there, called the Federalist Society. 3-minute lecture by I knew it had to be a law professor, but I didn't check till the end, explaining who is legally a judge. And he explained all about, like, federal administrative law judges wore black robes, but they weren't really judges, and immigration. He never mentioned the most important judges in the country, the ones that do 90% of the work, state court judges. Mm-hmm. And 13 of those state court systems existed before the United States did and continue to exist. But my comment was typical of a university law professor, doesn't even mention the state system that does most of the work, thinks everything revolves around the federal courts, which is why students graduate and don't know anything about practicing law.
Judge, does the Federalist Society have chapters all over the country?
They do. We have one here, one in Montgomery, and one in Birmingham. And it's not just for lawyers. I, in fact, would love to have more non-lawyers, because one of the problems with lawyers is they start thinking too lawyerly instead of thinking outside of the box. Now, if somebody asks me a question, Judge, what is the law according to the Supreme Court on this? I'm going to tell them, but I'm going to tell them the Supreme Court's wrong, and they interpreted it wrong, and here's why. So, that comes up a good bit. For instance, nowhere in the Constitution is the Supreme Court given the power to be the final and ultimate judge of what the Constitution means. They took or usurped that power, guess what, 1959. That wasn't done back in the 1803 in Marbury versus Madison. They took that power in 1959, and the other two branches just gave in and let them do it. And they shouldn't. And that's the reason we have these nasty fights over who's going to be a new member of the Supreme Court, because they have all the power now. If they didn't have all that power, the confirmation process would be like it normally was, gentlemanly, quick, a day or two, and it'd be over with.
Based on qualifications.
Yeah, exactly, not based on how are you going to vote in a particular issue. But Jefferson commented back after Justice Cushing died in Madison's administration. He wrote gleefully to Madison, "I see old Cushing is dead. Now maybe we can get a real Republican with a small R on the court." Well, they've been fighting this forever, and the court was never supposed to have that power. And what the legislative branch does, Congress, is they punt all these issues that they don't want to touch. Let's say like same-sex marriage. They let the courts decide that because they don't want to vote on anything.
Yeah.
Or declaring war. They won't do that. They just let the executive do that. They don't want to go on record for anything. So one reform we need is repeal of the 17th Amendment. 17th Amendment provided for required popular elections of U.S. senators. That made the legislative branch more, quote, democratic. And then what happened is that the senators were not representatives of the state, which they were supposed to be. They became representative of the people. And you see a lot of senators, they couldn't care less what the members of the voters of their state think. As long as they can raise money nationally, they'll get elected. But before, the legislature selected the senators, and they could even recall the senators if a senator voted in a way that harmed the state. So that was done during the progressive era, Teddy Roosevelt, Wilson, etc. Horrible thing, as well as the income tax amendment. That should be repealed too, but snowball's chance in hell of doing that. Let me urge you to look at one thing on our YouTube channel. I put and it's on our Facebook page, a link that says, I think, are we a republic or a democracy? And it's part of a debate between law professor Randy Barnett, who's frankly one of the best libertarian conservative law professors in the country, and a guy named Reed, Professor Reed, who is about as left as they come. and they're debating the Electoral College. Remember, our phone number here at FM Talk 1065 is 205-251. I'm going back some years, 251-343-0106. Call me about any subject, the court system, the law, self-defense. You can also text that into that number, and somehow we get it there. Right here on Armed Alabama, and I'm going to have a quiz question for you when we get back. We'll see if anybody can answer it, American History Quiz. But give us a call, 251-343-0106.
This program is a production of Armed Alabama, LLC. The comments and views of the hosts are those of Armed Alabama, LLC, for which it is solely responsible. The view and comments of the callers, guests, and texters do not necessarily represent the views of the sponsors or advertisers of Armed Alabama, LLC, or of Armed Alabama, LLC, Bigler Broadcasting, LLC, FM Talk 1065, or WABH. No comments from Judge Rusty Johnston should be taken as legal advice, but as educational information. Judge Johnston is not engaged in the practice of law and should not be sought out to answer legal questions off the air. Seek legal advice from a qualified attorney who knows the complete specifics of your legal matter.
Step up to the firing line. Armed Alabama is back. Questions, comments, and texts at 343-0106.
Little pigs, let me come in. Not by the hair on your chinny chin chin. Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in. Here's Johnny.
Back with Armed Alabama. That is a case, one of the few cases where you are allowed to shoot through a door if you fear deadly physical force is about to be applied upon you without looking through it, because she knew, Shelley Duvall knew that Johnny was on the other side with a fireman's axe chopping through.
If it had been a metal door with a bar on it, the outcome would have been totally different.
Absolutely. And if that had been a EMT there to render her aid, that'd be entirely different. But it wasn't. On November 2nd, that is a Saturday, and it's about 2 or 3 weeks, there is a widespread grassroots rally for the Second Amendment in Washington, D.C. It's on the Capitol lawn, and it's organized by a lot of the groups, not the NRA, but a lot of the groups. You heard Rod Pincus a few weeks ago. He's part of it. But I want to give you the website you can go to and check it out. I'm going to do everything I can to get there. I'm going to be in Birmingham Tuesday night, which is, Charlie's the 25th anniversary of Perry. Actually, it's the anniversary is the 19th, but we have a party every year. 25th anniversary of Perry Hooper finally being sworn in as Chief Justice almost a year late after he was stalled by the people who like to steal votes. But go to www.secondamendmentrally.com. I'm going to put that up on our Facebook page right now and get more information.
And what date in November?
November 2nd. That's the first Saturday. And, you can get there. You don't have to. First, if you want to save money, don't stay in the District of Columbia. Stay out in Alexandria or someplace, because the hotels are extremely expensive there. But you can stay 30, 40 minutes out. It's at 2 in the afternoon. So, you could get there that day, too. So try to make it there. I'm going to try to make it there. I'll give you a little more info as we go on next week, and I just put the link up to it. And so go to one of the sites and check it out. Okay, our trivia for the day, and I don't think our message thing where you can text your message is working. So you need to call in any event, 251-343-0106. We all know about the American Revolutionary War, American War of Independence, whatever you call it, that generally started in 1775 and ended 1783. But we're sitting down here in Mobile, Alabama right now. And you often, I want to take my kids to some sites that, some battles and some events during the Revolutionary War. Guess I got to go to Lexington, Massachusetts or someplace. Where's the closest battle spot or place there was an armed engagement to where we live right here in Mobile, Alabama. And I'll obviously give you 100 or 200 miles spread. But if you're sitting here in Mobile, Alabama and wanted to check out something that had anything to do, a battle to do with the Revolutionary War, American War of Independence, where would you have to go? So give us a call here at 343-0106, and you win an Brownells AR-15 30-round magazine. It has the self-leveling follower, the silicone chrome spring. So real, I think it's a $15 value. You know, I go from back and forth to I like the P-Mags or these, but these are real metal, and in the long run, they'll probably be interested. Maybe banned if Beto becomes the president, which I don't think there's a chance of that happening, but it could happen if he becomes president. Total fool. But he says so many things that indicate his ignorance of our history and the Constitution. It is not. I mean, he says something. He or Biden said the Second Amendment only means you can have a musket to be in the militia. Well, if we're going by those standards, then the U.S. Constitution means the Congress only has the authority to set up a wooden schooner navy, you know. I mean, that's all they can establish.
I think some of these candidates just say things so people will write them a check, they hope, and they have no clue as to if they were to get elected.
Absolutely.
No clue on how to make it happen.
Do you know last year, Charlie, we had more people killed in wildfires in California than were killed in all these so-called mass shootings in the United States. But, you know, mass shootings are publicized, scare people, and it's the everyday things like falling off a ladder or tripping down your steps. Those are the things likely to harm you or kill you, not a mass shooting. Best way to get rid of mass shootings is to do away with gun-free zones. They're the fake zones that people think they're safe in, but they are really not safe in. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of gun-free zones here. Okay, my question again is, and I don't think it's in the Alabama history books, maybe it is, or those history books if you're in elementary school and all, high school, but Revolutionary War, American Revolutionary War, or War of Independence, where's the closest battle that was fought to us? All right, we've gotten past Clarence Thomas. That was an outrageous situation. I want to talk a little bit about the court system, your rights, etc. Now, I'm speaking from the standpoint of you all are law-abiding citizens. I'd tell gang members the same thing, but you are law-abiding citizens. I don't think we got a lot of gang members listening. If you get stopped for speeding, the police ask you, may I see your driver's license? Yeah, give them your driver's license. That's the law. It doesn't violate your Fifth Amendment right to say, yes, officer, here it is. Give me your driver's license. But after he looks at your license, if he says something like that, we're conducting mandatory safety checks. Could I search your car? Say no. And if you don't like a confrontation, say, my husband owns this car, and he said never let anybody search it. I'd let you, but you know how husbands are. The reason why is, for instance, a guy repairing your car, he could have dropped some marijuana in there or Quaalude or whatever the common drug of choice is these days. First of all, it's your right, and he doesn't have a warrant. He doesn't have probable cause, so don't let him search your car. But the practical reasons are something is going to delay you, and something may be found in your car that could implicate you. He has a right. He has a right to ask you what your favorite color is if he wants to. But the only thing you have to answer is your name and give him your ID. Oftentimes, and sometimes it's just an icebreaker, where are you coming from? You don't have to answer that. Courts have ruled that. A lot of times that's kind of, where are you coming from? Well, I'm coming from 3 blocks down the street. Oh, right where that bank was robbed. Okay. Just, you know, you want to be courteous. You don't want to be like a sovereign citizen. But if the questions get more certain than that, where were you 2 hours ago? Were you in Sears Roebuck when there was a Sears Roebuck and when there was a
There's
robbery?
A throwback.
Just say, officer, I'm not going to answer any questions, and I want to talk to a lawyer, and invoke both of those rights. You don't have to say, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that anything I say may tend to incriminate me. First of all, that's a terrible line to use. I've got a much better one, but you want to invoke your right to counsel and you want to invoke your right to be silent. But if it's a routine traffic stopping, the speeding, for instance, you know how fast you were going? No, sir, officer. Don't say, well, I think I was going 68. Or, well, look, he knows how fast you're going. That's to get you in a conversation. You don't need to be in a conversation. You probably broke the law. Take your ticket. You've probably done it 1,000 times and gotten away with it, so don't complain too much about it. But know what your rights are. The reason I mentioned this, I noticed on AL.com, first person charged with possession of a stolen gun was arrested the other day, and that was in AL.com. And it says the stolen gun was found in his car after the police searched his vehicle, in the seat after the police searched his vehicle. Well, could be two ways to do that. They could have been towing his vehicle. Maybe it was stolen. Maybe he didn't have a driver's license, whatever. And before they can do an inventory search of your vehicle before they tow it. But I would suspect when he was asked, can we search your car, he either didn't say no or said sure. And his car was searched. Now, maybe it's good that he's being arrested. I frankly don't think. I think we need less laws. This was touted as such a great law. I guarantee you he's probably has a criminal record, and it wasn't legal for him to even possess a firearm. The point he was trying to make was he could only have been charged with possession depending on the value of the gun, which, it's going to be a misdemeanor probably. Yes, Charlie?
No, I was just going to ask you, and I haven't followed it real closely, but isn't it a relatively new law about committing a crime with a stolen gun? Or just possessing a stolen? It is possessing would be.
It depends on what you mean by new. It has been a law, federal and state, for probably 25 years that committing a felony with a firearm allegedly adds time on your sentence. Believe me, that's like the 3 strikes and you're out law. Mm-hmm. It can be worked 100 ways where that's just totally ineffective. They were talking about committing, enforce the law. If you commit a robbery with a gun, that's an armed robbery or a knife, that is a Class A misdemeanor, and the sentence range is 10 to life. But if you have a gun, it's 20 to life. Well, that's one of those things that we need to get rid of the pardon and parole board, have them just do pardons, not paroles. People need to serve their sentence. I'd be the first to say maybe they shouldn't serve a 25-year term for a burglary, but maybe it ought to be 7, and they ought to serve every day of it. Remember, if you know the answer, where's the closest spot the Battle of the Revolutionary War took place to where we are right now, give us a call, 251-343-0106 here on FM Talk 106.5 in Mobile, Alabama. And we're going to go to a break, and we will be back after the break, hopefully. And we got Terry on the line next. Terry will get you right after this break.
Step up to the firing line. Armed Alabama is back. Questions, comments, and texts at 343-0106.
I'm looking for Josie Wales. That'd be me. You're wanted, Wales. I reckon I'm right popular. You a bounty hunter? Yeah, got to do something for a living these days. Diane ain't much of a living, boy.
Diane ain't much of a living, boy. Outlaw Josie Wales, one of my favorite movies with a great song, the Rose of Alabama. Let's take Terry first. Terry, were you calling and answer the question or just something else in general?
Oh, yeah. I've just tell y'all how much I enjoy the show, listen every week, and to tell Judge Rusty that you are correct on the new law in Alabama, where possession only of a stolen firearm is now a felony rather than the dollar value of the weapon.
Yeah, and
it just passed this year and went into effect the first of this month, I believe.
Yeah, and that's one of those things, again, You know, that guy they called, I have no idea who he is. It doesn't really matter, but
well, most of these guys that go around breaking in cars and stealing weapons has probably got a warrant out for them.
That's
anyway,
what I was going to say.
Stopped,
and in the end, they plea bargained it.
He probably didn't give a permission for a search, but yeah, I got your point there. And I've always, when I've been pulled over, they always ask me, "Do you have weapons?" Or I say, "Yes, I do," and I hand them my concealed carry permit, and then they ask me where it's at. And it always turns into a spectacle because I'm up here in Saraland, and you got a cop asking me to get away from the vehicle, and he goes and gets it out from under the seat. He unloads it, then he goes and runs the serial number, then he hands it back to me, and he tells me don't load it until I get home.
Yeah, and what I love is
I've got a permit to carry it.
Most negligent discharges, or most negligent discharges are loading or unloading a gun. There are probably 10,000 different kinds of pistols and revolvers. He doesn't know how to unload and load your gun properly, and yet he's picking it up oftentimes at night and attempting to do that. So you don't have to tell them, I'm a little uncomfortable with lying. If it's a federal official, don't lie. But if it's a state official, local official, you got every right in the world to do it, unless it's, it's in an obvious place where he's going to see it. He puts the flashlight in on you, then tell him, because you don't want to get shot if he sees something. But, yeah, that's right. And believe me.
The last time I was pulled over, I was really surprised because it was a state trooper here in 8 Mile, and he asked me if I had a firearm. I told him I did, and he said, "Will you hand it to me?" And I said, "It's right."
That's pretty dumb.
My hip here between the seat.
Yeah.
And I said, "I'm going to hand it to you, handle first," and I did slowly.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Man, I'm surprised."
Yeah, that wasn't smart.
In that situation, you get shot because you got a gun in your hand, and he's standing right there at the window.
Let's say your whatever enemy hired him to kill you. Well, he says, "Go ahead and hand it to me." He blows you away when you're doing it. It's justified.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. I've got it in my hand. What's to stop him from shooting me dead?
Yeah. So my rule of thumb
I ain't
again.
really comfortable with handing. I'd rather step out and let you get it.
There you go. Just for everybody else in this state and in most states, frankly, but there's some that are different. Check your state. That you don't have to notify the police that you have a firearm just upon being stopped, or if they ask you. But I always tell everybody, if it's in a place where it ought to be so you can get to it quick, that the police are probably going to see it during the stop, like on your hip or in a holster in the car or in your glove box where you're going to go and get your insurance papers. Tell them, because you don't want to be going for the insurance papers and he sees you going for a gun. But if it's someplace else, none of his business, He can ask anything he wants, but you don't have to answer it. Good point.
I keep mine well out of sight, but I just hate the life of the man.
I know too. I do too.
Respect him, and work with him. Maybe he'll do the same. But
I do too.
It's just a pain. With even that state trooper, he unloaded it and made me leave with it in the back of the car and not load it. And I was like, "This is stupid." That's
concealed carry
I'm
firearms owners
to carry that gun, and you're. I guess you're trying to protect yourself that I don't load it and shoot at him or something. I'm like, why?
And does he think a felon with a gun is going to tell him they've got one in the car?
Could part of this be a lack of uniformity in training?
It is. Yeah.
That
it's like
it ought to be a universal set of rules that law enforcement has to follow when they stop
it's
you.
The people factor is the problem. It's like a friend of mine
and if you hand them a concealed carry permit and they go run the serial number and everything checks out, they should hand it back to you just as you handed it to them.
Absolutely.
Or they removed it from your vehicle. They shouldn't unload it and then force you to leave it with it unloaded. It's just,
and that business
that's what bugs me.
Taking your gun and running it, they're trying to run it to see if it's stolen because, your permit is for you to carry any type of concealed carry.
They want to check your permit and also that your gun is clear.
Yeah,
on both ends.
He really doesn't have any business.
All mine are.
He doesn't have any business checking your gun.
For them to unload it and then force me to carry it in the trunk unloaded.
Yeah.
And tell me not to load it until I get home. That's totally out of line.
And I hate it because it's the modern times. You said I don't like lying. Well, you got to look at it this way. I don't like people asking questions they're not supposed to be asking. So just put it that way.
That's true. I've heard you say that before, and I thought about it, and I said, well, I may just tell them no next time.
Yeah, do
they
it.
ask, because it always turns into a spectacle, and then you have to leave with an unloaded gun.
Unless it's a federal agent, then they can get you for lying. Like, Martha Stewart went to the penitentiary for lying, not insider trading, lying. She can't ever own a firearm again. I'm not a big fan of hers, but that's ridiculous.
Democrats.
Yeah, the whole thing's just ridiculous. More laws, less freedom, the way I look at it. Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
well,
I appreciate
the show.
it. We'll talk to you. Scott.
I think he's got the answer,
Scott
Judge.
from Fairhope. Have you got our answer? Drum roll.
I think I got the right answer.
Okay.
Would have been the siege of Pensacola, initiated by the British, which actually started the Battle of Mobile.
Yeah, absolutely. You could actually say Mobile or Pensacola, but Pensacola was a bigger battle, and it's probably closer to you. One thing interesting, Spain declared war on Great Britain about the same time France did. Spanish fleet attacked along with some Spaniards and all that had come over from New Orleans by land, and they attacked Pensacola. And after they secured Pensacola, the fleet went back to Jamaica, the Spanish fleet, leaving the French fleet free to go to Yorktown to besiege it, where Cornwallis surrendered. But, that's just, like I say, if it didn't happen in Massachusetts, it's not important. But, Scott, if you could, if you want to say anything else, fine, but I want to give you back in a second to Phil, get your address so we can send you your AR magazine.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate it, and I'll enjoy your show.
Thank you for calling in. Phil, hold on a sec. Phil?
He's got it.
Good. Yeah, it's by the treaty of Paris, I think of 1763, that ended the so-called French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War. Everything from the Pearl River over to Florida, which is at southern Alabama, southern Mississippi, northwest Florida, was ceded to the British. And that was 1763, so the British had this area for a while.
See, my history book, Judge, said everything happened in New England.
Well, I'm afraid mine did too. And
why is that, do you think?
It's just the same
Nobody
thing.
down here wrote history books?
It's because by the way, do you know we had more, if you talk about, we had problems obviously with enslaved blacks and all that, but if you took white males in the South prior to the war between the states, there were more literate white males in the South than there were in the North. Speaking of war between the states, this has not gotten much publicity because they lost. The big effort to remove General Robert E. Lee's statue and Stonewall Jackson's statue in Chancellorsville, the circuit judge ruled there 3 or 4 weeks ago that the state law that protects antiquities and war monuments means you cannot remove those statues. So that leftist push to cleanse history. And listen, if you believe Robert E. Lee was a homicidal maniac, that's your business. But let's look around the world. Genghis Khan probably killed more people than we can ever imagine, especially in percentages. And in Mongolia, his picture is on their currency. He's also got a number of monuments and statues in Mongolia.
Wasn't Robert E. Lee a graduate of West Point?
He was a graduate of West Point.
And I think he was pretty high up in the ranking in his class, if I remember.
Do you know who had the highest ranking ever, unless something's happened in the last 5 years, in the history of West Point? He was not only number one, but had the highest GPA.
I'm almost afraid to guess.
Douglas MacArthur.
That doesn't surprise me.
Is often a victim of a lot of now he was an arrogant, pompous person, but who wants to follow a general this mild, meek, and introverted?
That's right.
I don't.
Hey, boys, would you please go down and get down there on that firing line?
He said about Eisenhower. He said that Eisenhower was the best damn clerk he'd ever had. And Eisenhower said, I studied acting under him for 8 years. But interestingly, of all people, General Alexander Haig was one of his aides in Japan when the Korean War started.
No kidding. I did not know that.
Pretty interesting. If if you study the Incheon invasion in the Korean War, that was probably one of the most brilliant military maneuvers of all time. I mean, it had depending on which book you read, a 26-foot tidal range, low tide to high tide. First of all, I'd like to see that. I've seen one as big as 15 feet in northern Scotland, but 26 feet.
And where was this again?
This is Incheon in Korea, just below the demilitarized zone, just below Seoul. It's on the west side, and I think it was 75,000 U.S. troops landed there, cutting off the North Koreans who had encircled, U.S. and UN forces in Pusan, and the northern communists were so paranoid they wouldn't tell their troops, hey, you're getting cut off by a invasion there, you better get north. No, they cut them off and destroyed them. And, you know, like it or not about MacArthur, well, he almost started a nuclear war. Friends, we had 24 nuclear warheads during the Korean War. The Soviets had 2, but no delivery system. So I don't think there was going to be a nuclear war. But all that aside, he said, if the war doesn't end in victory, it's generations of Americans are going to have to contend with the peace, and we still are. We'll be back after these messages with more of Armed Alabama.
Step up to the firing line. Armed Alabama is back. Questions, comments, and texts at 343-0106.
I like you, Philip. But be assured, bite my hand, and I will put you down. Your division is in charge of native crime. Or would you rather I was in charge of native crime? I don't think you'd like my methods.
There we go. Okay, back to your rights a little more. Same thing goes, let's say police officer friendly, knocks on your door and says, Mr. Charlie, we are out canvassing the neighborhood. There's been some lawnmowers stolen. Mind if I come in and talk to you about it? Well, Charlie's going to say, no, would you like some coffee? And sit there. And then the officer's going to see Charlie's marijuana plant growing in the corner and arrest him. Remember, anything, if you invite...
You haven't been to my house, Rusty. How do you know I have a marijuana plant?
Anything a police officer sees in your house, you've invited him in.
Sure.
And, you know, it depends. You invite him in to talk. Now, when you turn your back, he can't. He's really not permitted to go upstairs and start searching your house. But it's just as easy, assuming you know he's a police officer, not somebody in disguise trying to rob you or burglarize you, just step out on the porch and talk to him. Because you have no idea how many laws there are outside. And let's put it this way. Let's say Charlie did have medical marijuana in his house, which is illegal in this state. But who could condemn him for that? And they arrest him and say, Charlie, we won't prosecute you, but your neighbor over there is a member of a sovereign citizens group, and we really need an informant in that sovereign citizens group. And if you'll join it and go with him to the meetings, we know he's asked you, these charges will be dropped. That's exactly what happened to Randy, gosh, I can't think of his name, Ruby Ridge. He had a sawed-off shotgun that a friend sawed off for him he sawed it off for a friend, and the friend got him to saw it off 1/4 of an inch too short. I guess it would have been 17 3/4 inches. You know, that's pretty minor. In most cases, they would just take the weapon from you. Well, he was served a warrant. That's when he was actually talked to first, and they wanted him to infiltrate one of these white nationalist communities up, was he in Montana, I think. He wasn't one of those. He was just kind of a hermit. He said, no, I'm afraid to get involved. I start going to a meeting and informing on those people. I've got children here. And so he refused. That's when the arrest warrant was issued, and they came to arrest him and killed his wife and laid siege to the place, etc. And by the way, the federal government finally settled a huge lawsuit brought by him for killing his wife and I think a son too. So just step out on the porch. No need of getting too chummy. I'm sure he's got things to do. That goes into another matter. Lots of times people show up at your door, and you don't know who they are, and we're in the South, and, until I was a judge at least, heck, I'd open the door. How can I help you? Well, most of the time you didn't know, well, I'm selling this carpet cleaning stuff. If you don't know who it is at the door, you got a couple of choices, obviously. Let's say you can see through a peephole or camera. You can remain silent, and he'll probably go away. If he's not a criminal, no problem. Sometimes criminals, though, do case your house to see if anybody's there. They'll knock on the door. If they know, of course, you can't know people's phones anymore. So many people have cell phones. But they may do things to find out if somebody's there. So it's better to yell through the door, can I help you? Yes, I'm selling whatever. We don't need any. It's always good to, my husband and I don't need any.
Right.
To insinuate, nothing wrong with lying to a criminal. But you don't have to give them your information. And I hate to say this because we always are taught to be truthful. But keep in mind there are a lot of people that are trying not to be truthful to you, trying to do something to you. So don't give them your information. And also think twice about, you've got a mailbox out there. Obviously, put your address on it. You don't need to put your name on the address on your mailbox. We used to always have names on the address. Joseph S. Johnston, my real name. But then somebody's kind of got something. We're looking for, of course, if they said Mr. Johnston, we'd know it right off the bat. But, we're looking for so-and-so. Just put your address on there. And remember, again, a big thing is theft of the mail. If you're on Social Security and get a check from or other type checks from somebody every month. I get a check from the state for retirement. Now, this is mandatory now to save money, but it's a direct deposit. And it may be mandatory in Social Security, I don't know. But don't have it put in your mailbox. Just have it direct deposited. Same goes if you still mail checks out with your bills. Think about either putting it out right before the mailman comes, or if you go somewhere during the day, dropping it off at the post office or some business where you can leave it. You're just asking for trouble. Identity theft. They say there are 11 million illegals in the country. They've said that since 1980. So certainly they have to be 12 million at least.
30 or 40 million.
Yeah, exactly. So those little things. But first rule of thumb is lock your doors and lock your windows. Most people gain entry through unlocked doors and windows. I can't tell you the number of cases I saw like that. So before you start thinking about, high-tech alarms that email you notices and all this stuff, just lock up. Then you can go that an extra step and have timers on. But the best thing to do, too, if you're going out of town for a few days, if you do have a trusted neighbor, and nobody knows their neighbors anymore, make friends with your neighbors. Ask them to pick up your mail for you every day. And maybe if they have an extra car and you only have one car, park their car over in your driveway. The more we can make your house look occupied, something's going on, they'll go into one of your other neighbor's house. And remember, the crime is burglary. Burglary is taking something, breaking into your house or walking into your house and committing a theft. Robbery is using force or the threat of physical force to take your property. People all the time, my house has been robbed. Well, it hadn't. It's been burglarized.
Going back to something you said earlier about letting people in your front door, people, I don't even let them in if they're handing out religious tracts because you never know. And
I had an alcoholic uncle that did that, and he invited them in, and after 2 hours, they wanted to leave. He was preaching to them.
Anyway, if they do come in and they look around and you've got some nice paintings on the wall and some expensive furniture in your front room, if their intention is to burglarize,
let's come back later.
Yeah, this house, there may be some valuable stuff in here.
Charlie, you'd be surprised how many burglars are ex-carpet installers. I had a tile layer here that was molesting kids. He would lay tiles in people's houses. That's where you check out who had kids. So, you just really got to watch it.
You never know.
The good criminals, and people might say, well, I'll run a criminal check on him. First of all, it's difficult to do, but let's say you do. Good criminals don't have criminal records. The worst child molester you'll find probably has never been arrested before. That's because he's good at it. That doesn't mean you ought to let him. I thought I was being good one time. My daughter had type 1 diabetes, very serious. And so she was at the age where spending the night. So I wouldn't let her spend the night at all. Well, finally, and I'll cover this up a little bit, we had some friends whose wife was in the medical business and then husband was in the judicial business. So we'll let her go there. It's perfect. The wife could take care of anything. Within a year, the wife was charged with manslaughter or some kind of crime. Now, it was one of these. She had a drug problem, I think. But you never know.
You can't overprotect your child, but use common sense.
That's exactly right. Especially, this day and age, crime is actually at an all-time. We don't know if it's all-time low or not, but it hadn't been this low since the 50s. But if you're the one victimized, it's like being struck by lightning. You're the one harmed. So,
or having one hurricane in the whole season.
Yeah, absolutely. So
if it hits you, it was a bad season.
Right. You got to be on your guard. I'll tell you one more trick before we sign off. My daughter had a wreck a year or two ago, took pictures of the other car. This was at 8 in the morning, 4-lane highway. Everybody was there. The people that hit her, 2 or 3 guys said, "Could we borrow your phone to call work and tell them we're late?" Sure. Well, when they borrowed her phone, they erased the pictures that she'd taken of their car. And when the police got there, they had already taken off. Policeman was savvy enough, and I wish I'd known his name, to say, well, he erased it, but he didn't know where the double erase feature. So he found the pictures, and we had that. He's never been caught. Folks, again, I want to thank McCoy Outdoors and Mike Ward Liberty Safe, our sponsors. Go by and see them for all of your needs. I want to remind you of the Second Amendment rally on November 2nd, and remind you to go to our YouTube page, subscribe to it, and look at some of the recent ones I've put up. They're pretty good. I'm going to put the full one about Clarence Thomas up when I get home. Good night from Armed Alabama.